So, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today's episode is a gripping one where I caught up with the brilliant Sandi Goddard of Goddard Delaney, where we catch up on all things strategy, growth, scaling. Sandi's been in the game for years, helping businesses to scale and scale sustainably. And in this episode, we get real value in terms of what's actually working. If you're leading a business or thinking about how to position yourself in business, then this one's for you. So let's get stuck in.
One of the subjects we wanted to talk about, which is relevant to probably everybody at the stage, I think there's 4 stages, or maybe 4 or 5 stages. I don't know how you see it, but I see your freelance as one stage. Maybe they've started up, maybe it's up to 100K or whatever the ceiling is for a freelancer. And then there's the kind of the Grand Canyon of death where they try to become a business, and so they need employees and they need more marketing and they need to fund that somehow. And there's a huge step, and a lot of businesses struggle and fail. That's why there's such high failure rates. And then once you've got a business, can you leave the business and work out of the business? And then when you do have that, then can you scale, and what's the exit? Which is where you're probably going to be helping a lot of people, is that higher end, and I'm probably going to be helping people probably to hand over to you. There's probably a nice kind of relay run there that we could do. But what's your thoughts on that? So how to survive past the first year into 5, 10 years and actually having something you can exit from?
Looking at the startups that I've known over the years, so many of them have worked. Well, actually, it varies so much, doesn't it? You have people who start a business and very quickly employ someone. They don't even get a freelancer in, they employ someone. There are others who will go on for years reluctant to employ someone, even though there's a ceiling on what they can earn.
And why is that, do you think? Is
I
that
think
just scared,
yeah, I
not
think it's
leaders,
fear.
different skills?
I think there's one fear is that as soon as you employ someone, you're responsible for them. You're responsible for their mortgage, effectively, aren't you? They're going to rely on you to pay them regularly.
It's
And it's
scary.
very scary. It is scary because that's another liability, a responsibility that you've got to bring in enough work to be able to keep them occupied. So the decisions are things like, do we continue but only use external resources, freelance support, agencies, whatever, for a number of years before we've got to that point where we can look at it and think, oh my God, do you know how much we're paying out? It would be cheap to have an employee, even if they were part-time employees. So there are all those considerations. Personally, I think in the past I have employed, but I think these days, if I was to build another business, I would build it on the back of partnerships and freelance support and so on before I took in someone.
And you say these days, it's interesting when you bring the world that we are in.
And you've got AI, which you know all about.
Yeah, I think the world's changing at such a fast rate that I don't think the world even knows yet what is coming and how much that's going to change. And those periods in the past that were like almost the agricultural revolution, the digital revolution, and everything in between that. There's lots of different areas, from when you used to have people to man the switchboards, and then we got better on telephones, and all those jobs when it used to take 100 people to plow a field, and then you brought a tractor in and 98 people were out of a job. And so I think that the world that we're in now, I don't think people realize that if there are 100 jobs, probably 95 of them are going to be obsolete. And in my opinion, I don't know how long it would take to get there, because people do trust and people do buy from people. But even jobs, even like illegal, I don't think that there's a lot of jobs that are not safe if it's just. And take knowledge, for example. You have a lot of knowledge. I have a lot of knowledge. And I know many people that we work with that have such a knowledge that we live in a world where knowledge is value, and you can earn money from that knowledge. But AI is 15,000 times more intelligent. If everything is in AI and only 10% of the world have woken up, what happens when 100% of the world have woken up? And all those jobs start to change, and So I think we're moving so fast that there's that kind of, we're talking about how do you grow a business to 1 year, but it's not going to be, the playing field shifts typically every 10, 15 years. But what happens when it shifts every 6 months or 1 year?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're speaking, I'm thinking of an experience I've had twice now with a particular restaurant that I've used for the lunches that I do each month. And so you can't just phone up and book. You can phone them up, but you get an automation talking to you. Hi, and so you book your table, and that's fine. So it's basically online booking. So you could just go online and click and do it. But then when you want to change your booking, so say you've booked for 20 people, and then a few days beforehand, you realize you're only going to have 10 and you want to go and change it. What you get offered, because you think, oh, that's great, I'll just ring them up. You get offered a new table at a new time, but they're not editing your original order. And the same thing happened
Okay.
just going online, because I used one of these booking agencies the last time. I went online to change my booking because I had 4 people who had to cancel. And it did exactly that. So instead of 1 o'clock on this particular day, the table of 12 was going to be changed to a table of 8. It made those changes and then told me to choose a different time because I was getting a new table. And in the end, I had to phone up, find a telephone number and phone up and speak to human beings. And they said,
Yeah.
oh, it's fine, leave it with me. And they made the changes, sent me an email. And I spent quite a lot of time going backwards and forwards trying to edit my.
So there's going to be problems along
So
the way, isn't there, as they perfect the systems?
and that just irritates. And it's really bad for business because
Yeah.
I'm going to be reluctant to use that company. The service at the restaurant's brilliant. The food is amazing. The service is wonderful. It's affordable because they also have a special menu. It's absolutely wonderful. It's just this awful experience when you want to change.
But the experience is everything. And I think if there's two things that I think people could focus on, it's how they make people feel in their marketing, in their delivery, and all throughout the whole experience. And then how good it tastes in terms of a restaurant side of things. I went to a restaurant the other day and it was a sushi restaurant. And it's somewhere that we've been going for a couple of years. It's under new management this summer. And it's a seasonal in the winter. It only opens like in the evenings or whatever. So we were really excited. It opened at lunchtime. We thought, let's go and have a look. And the same thing when you walk in, I really like the setting. I like the area that it's in. So I'm feeling really good. We go to sit down and normally they'll bring the menus over. And so couple of minutes go by and I'm starting to think, okay, attention to detail is not what it was. Like they normally would come over and would you like any drinks? So then this woman comes over and she says, oh, I'm ever so sorry. We're really busy and I'm just a bit flustered and that forgive me. So here's the menus. Let me come back in a minute. I'll get you some drinks. And then 5 minutes later, it's not a lot of time and I'm probably being pedantic, but she comes back and she says, would you like a drink? And I'm like, yes, 5 minutes ago, probably. And then how she was flustered, like she was forgetting things, she all over the place. Like you could tell I felt like she was the owner trying to do the job. And maybe someone was off that day, but the food, the way it looked, the restaurant, the way it is, always the same. So from a kind of visual point of view, they've got it going on. I've seen their marketing, it's really good. So from a visual point of view, really good. But the experience let them down. And the food, that's gone down a couple of notches. It just wasn't as good. So it didn't taste good. So I think there's a couple of things that the two best bits of advice is if you're going to open a sandwich shop and the first bite is, oh my God, that's amazing. So there's the service or the product that you have. But even if your product's not that good, it's how you make people feel in the whole experience. If you focus on those things, you almost don't need to market or sell. Like things will just happen because it's so amazing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I know hospitality is an area, a sector that has really struggled since COVID, during and after COVID, and getting people to work. Just employing the right people is difficult. The right numbers, And then, of course, it hasn't helped any business that they're expected to pay, the minimum wage has gone up and the employee taxes have gone up. So the NI and all the rest of it, it is expensive to employ people. So employing the right number of people is a challenge in the hospitality sector. And if you recognize that and someone is off and you've got the burden is larger, there are a number of ways of doing that. You can actually reduce the tables, the covers, so that you're not stretched quite so much. But an easier way that so many restaurants do, as we both know, is say, I'm really sorry, can I offer you a free drink while you wait? Because it's going to be it'll take a bit longer today.
How you make them feel.
Yeah.
It could be the worst experience ever, but you could still make them feel good about it. I used to say as well, another thing that I think is good for whatever level of those businesses across the steps is that if there's a problem or something that you've messed up, that's a really huge opportunity from a sales and marketing point of view to fix it. To how you make someone
email
feel.
saying come back and we'll give you a starter on the house or a cocktail or whatever. Even if you don't go back, you'll feel much better, happier, and probably recommend them on. It depends if the food's good. I don't mind so much. You're going to a restaurant because you want nice food. You want good food. That's the key to going. Why? You don't just go to the restaurant for the ambience and the company. You go because of the food. And if the food is rubbish, then you're not really going to go back again. You can forgive poor service if it's one-off. You can forgive someone being rushed off their feet, not focusing as well as they should on you. But if the food isn't good as well, then that's it. I was thinking of a big pub on the river near us that does food, and they do chicken schnitzel. And I love schnitzel.
Oh,
but
me too.
Played around with it so that it's got a layer of that, not real cheese, that American cheddar stuff.
Yeah.
And then tomato sauce or something like that. It's disgusting. All I want, if I'm having a schnitzel, whether it's a Venus schnitzel or a chicken or whatever, I just want my breaded meat. And I am a meat eater, so I hold my hands up to it. But I don't want all these other layers added to it, which just, to me, is horrible.
When we were in Vietnam recently, they had all of these kind of English and German kind of complexes everywhere. So you felt at home in Vietnam because everybody's everywhere. But they did schnitzel a lot on the menus, and there were all different types. There was like an Italian style schnitzel, which is probably like what you just explained. There was the mushroom sauce schnitzel, and then there was like the pizza schnitzel. They're like every kind of schnitzel, they would put stuff on top of it. And it just reminded me when you said that.
I think it takes us back to product, doesn't it? Making sure that you've got the right product, not too many of them. It's like going to a restaurant where they've got pages and pages of a menu. And typically Chinese restaurants are often like that, aren't they? Because there's so much choice. And I think sometimes pull back on the choice and just do what you're doing really well. And then get known for something really brilliant. And I think that's what you're trying to do with the AI and AEO and so on. You're really focusing on the future and the future, how businesses will look and behave in the future and what they're going to need.
Yeah, and I hope that we can help at all of those levels. So kind of the freelancer, the startup, the scale up, and those that are looking to exit. I think there's some value there. So in the apps, I think over the next year or two, there's going to be like 100 different AI apps that come out. And that's really fantastic and it's interesting. But one of the things that I find most painful in life is when you have all of these tech products. In business, I find this really painful. And it's a problem for me that you have all of these tech products and they all have different subscriptions that come out on different days. And then it's the two-factor authentication that I find really painful, like where I just hate that. Like I know that we're in a world where we're trying to protect people's data. And so I see it as a good thing. But when we get to the stage that now I have to have 20 to 50, I give up. Like I don't want to have a 20 to 50 tech stack. And I think that's where, for me, the Tenacious AI platform becomes quite useful, is that every time AI develops, we put the app in. But more than that, they all talk to each other. It's all right having 50 apps, but they don't talk to each other. So now you've got to have a degree in Make or Zapier or to make them all talk to each other. So for us, the super agents, which we probably haven't talked enough about, is that because all of the apps talk to each other, then when you deploy the WhatsApp super agent, you can just message it. I want to send an email out to 1,000 people that are in this list. Send it in your WhatsApp. And all the apps talk, or write a blog and it can bring in all of the apps as its employees and just do the project. That's going to be the problem, I think, moving forward, is that two things. One is the pain of having all of that noise around the things that are available. And then the second thing is they don't talk to each other. So it counts out most business people are not very techy. So there's going to be a huge pain there that I think we're missing for me. So yeah, we're excited about the apps and how they help people. Because as you scale, the bigger you get, the more tech you're going to need. So better to have it in one place.
I think we're still going to need humans. As I was listening to you, it occurred to me that so there's a lot out there. We're bombarded now with loads and loads of messages from people, their videos, their podcasts, whatever. And not all of them are on message either. And I think that's the trick, is to ensure that your messaging is right. And at the moment, I'm sure people use ChatGPT, Claude, whoever, to write stuff. But if you don't understand the business, if you don't understand the core needs of the business or the aspirations of the owner, nobody's ever going to be able to write it. It has to be a human, because they're going to be more emotionally intelligent at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we enter into a world that if ChatGPT has 15,000 times more knowledge than we have, and so anybody could start a business and all of the knowledge is in there, which means thus they don't need you or I, technically. But you go to try to decode that and decipher that, you're going to need experienced people like you or I to help make that less noisy, to help people to focus, and the experience that brings. And also someone that you actually like working with. So AI is not going to replace that. So I think you're right. You do need people. But if you can have people that can use the tech, it's just one less problem to then have to worry about trying to join up loads of millions of different types of things. I can't do that. I can't use Zapier or Make to save my life. So I need something where it's one platform. But I think you're right. We will definitely need humans. AI just won't replace humans. I think that's where personal branding becomes really important, because
exactly.
Who are you?
And I think not in the near future, possibly, that it will change, because I know I didn't read the article, but I saw a headline about how certain people believe that AI is emotional now, understands emotions now. I don't think that's quite there yet, not in general. But yeah, what am I thinking? I'm thinking that in the past, when I began in marketing, Apple was the go-to for the creative industry. We all had Apples, and our corporate clients didn't. So that we had to. There was no common bridge between Apple Macs and PCs. It was really difficult, and eventually you've got things like Microsoft and so on. We became more and more compatible, and you didn't have this problem where we didn't speak to each other. Everything began to speak to each other. And I think these evolutions happen all the time. And everything evolves. And we've seen it in the last 20 odd years. Gosh, everything's miniaturized. So we take a phone around now that does the work, that more than does the work of my first my Apple desktop. It's just more than anything.
And isn't that crazy that, so I remember watching Steve Jobs talking about that phone. It must have been a talk maybe like 20 odd years ago, maybe 30, I don't know, talking about what the future holds in terms of the technology. So his belief is that You almost invent the future and think of what can be done and then work out how do you do that?
Yeah.
And that's their motto. How do we get there? But if you think, I wrote down how to use a computer, I remember I was of the era that I always thought, oh, I wish I had computers at school, because we didn't. Up until the last kind of 6 months before I left, we got taught how to use a computer. There was no internet. I'm making myself sound really old now. There was no mobile phones. So I was some ways fortunate. Back then I saw it as unfortunate, but I think fortunate to grow up in a world where we didn't have that. And so somebody had to teach me and the whole world how to use a computer when it became available to everybody. So if we think now that only 10% of the world knows about AI and ChatGPT, or 10% of the world are ChatGPT users, or Claude, or Perplexity, there are other platforms. But who's going to teach them how to use it? There's going to be so much noise. It's going to be so alien. It's going to be so difficult for people. I think we're going to need a load of people who get there quicker than others, who are going to need to handhold and guide a lot of people through that change. Like, again, how to use AI. So you are going to need people. Like, people aren't going to be able, there's going to be so much noise if you have 100 different things. Like, how do you get there and how do you get there quickly? Through people. So for me, I think, like, when I think about our business accelerators, it's not just about how to build a business, it's about how to build a business in an AI world and not get lost in the noise. Because if you're going to build a business, you've got to have crystal clear focus and strategy and deliver and execute.
And also you've got to look at your budgets. And when you're building a business and if presumably your audience, and you only have budgets are finite, doesn't matter how big a company is, there's only so much budget. So you have to decide if it's so from my perspective, I'm talking about marketing budget, sales marketing budget. You have to decide on what marketing mix is going to be most relevant to your audience, because you can't just cover everything. You need to be focused.
Yeah.
Coming to someone like you and saying, I need some form of social media strategy. Who should I be targeting? This is my audience. How much do you think I need to spend a month? These are things that human beings are probably better at the moment discussing with a client, coming up with the plans, coming up with the budgets, working out the strategy. What are the tactics we're going to employ?
Yeah, when you think about, I mean, that, absolutely, you need experts, you need people. And I think personally that will remain. I think AI is going to escalate at a rate that if you don't know about AI now, you're going to know about it in the next 2 years, and it's going to impact you. You're lucky if you already know about it. My advice would be go and study it, try and learn as much as you can, because we're not going to stop hurtling towards an AI world. It's absolutely going to happen. But then I think there's AI as it is now, and then where we're going to go with that. And you will need the guidance. If you could teach somebody, as an example, so you could say AI knows everything about law. And that's all well and good, because if you can ask it questions, you can ask it questions. This is where I fear for, let me give you another example, a business owner. I think anybody, you could be 15 years old, you could be 25, 35, 65, retired even. And with what AI has now, you could build a business, you could make a lot of money really quick because all the knowledge is there. So it becomes like your assistant. You don't need to know and learn and fail. Like, we've lived in a life where we've had to learn and fail and get to where we are to have that IP. And I now value that. I have gratitude towards the failures because it means I have the knowledge, and you can't take that away. But now we're entering into a world where we're going to give people the knowledge. So you're going to have an 18-year-old who can do what I and you can do with AI as its assistant and have the knowledge. But what you can't do is they can't come and have this conversation with you. You can't sit in a client meeting. You could tell a client anything to get them in the room, but you can't sit with a 300 million pound CEO because the conversation is not going to be there. You either know it or you don't know it. You're going to want to sit in a room with people. And I think people will eventually, so that I think a lot of people will fall down. they will think that this solves all their problems. And I think we're going to find out where people fall down on it. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Actually, you've just reminded me of a situation probably 30 years ago. I saw Martha Lane Fox, lastminute.com. So it's similar in a sense, because the .com era, and people were putting loads of money into .coms that continue to fail, and some of them just blew up and nothing happened. Others eventually started to make money. And I remember seeing Martha Lane Fox about 30 years ago, something like that, standing on a rostrum talking to a room full of hoteliers. And I'm talking about global hotel owners, mostly male, mostly in the middle age. And there's this very young woman standing up there speaking confidently about a business she knew really well, and persuading these people that if they used her organization for any rooms that weren't booked, for all the empty rooms, that they would be able to continue to grow and build their businesses. And they had to trust her, but she knew what she was talking about. She knew her business so well. And I think that can be applied today to owners of AI assisted businesses or AI businesses. If they know their business really well, they can talk to us, but it's still the human being, that is persuading us to use the business. So I think any startup, whether someone is 15 or 60 or 80, anyone who's starting a business today, support and facilitate the growth of their business, but they have to understand their business.
And I think there are, because that's such an important point, isn't it? I think there are levels to business, aren't there? So there's pillars. People think of business like you see what you're on the outside, so that's really easy, but you don't actually see what's underneath. And when you look at a house, for example, and it's quite basic, it's quite simple on the outside, but underneath that, I used to work in construction, so I know there's a lot that goes into the excavation, that goes into the planning, that goes into the structure, into the foundations, into the plumbing, into the electricity, there's all these different systems that are layered, the roofing, on top of each other to make that what it is. And it's all intentional and it's all planned. And so for your business.
And before that, you have the architect and the quality surveyor and the quantity surveyor.
Yeah. And at the start, the idea, and business is so similar. You have the idea, you have the planning. Don't take too long on the planning that you never get started. You have to start in business. The only difference is you have to start and fail along the way. You can't hire all of the experts like you can when you build a house. You're going to have to learn, which means failing. You've got to fall off the bike to ride the bike, and it will hurt. So the sooner you get started, make sure you've got a good business. And then there comes the IP. And then there's probably what you talk a lot about with clients is the brand assets. And then there's all sorts of different, the product and having the right products and not making that too noisy and knowing what you're talking about. And then the systems and processes in terms of scaling to building. I would imagine, and to tell the audience more, because we're going to have some businesses that are maybe at a certain stage and they're trying to get to the next stage. Like, surely when someone's looking to exit and what a buyer wants to see is that kind of the foundations, the systems, the processes, the people, the leadership, the structure of the house.
Absolutely. They want to know that the foundations are secure, but they also want to know that what they're buying is going to continue to grow once you've gone. That's so maybe we can talk like the garden is beautiful, but the garden is so well founded that it will continue to grow beautifully when the gardener has moved on and retired. I think it's so important to give your people confidence in their roles and in their abilities, and to give them some hope of growth. Are we going to get that next promotion? Is there a promotion for me? Or do I have to move on? Are we talking about dead men's shoes? In big corporations, often it's harder for those middle managers to go on into the next level. So they have to leave, and you're losing good people, or they leave and then come back in at another level, because that way they can ensure they're going to get promotion. In a smaller business, it's not so easy. In a very small business, it's easier.
And that's a bit that I missed in terms of one of the systems. One of the systems is the culture, right?
Yeah.
Which is incredibly important, the people in the business.
And that I do quite a lot of this, doing the surveys around culture, values, ethos, and trying to explain that you cannot implement it top down. You have to find out what your people think and feel about the business. You have to find out what your stakeholders, your suppliers, and your clients think about the business. We all think we know, but actually, without asking the questions, we won't have the answers.
I think that's one of the things that as Sandy, I consume a lot of podcasts, so I try to learn as much as possible. I don't watch television, don't listen to music. With even entertainment, one of the things I love is football. I try to not just watch loads of that and consume loads of that. And at the moment, I just really try and work on something that actually improves either my knowledge or the business. And I find that enjoyable. So there's no risk of burnout with that. And now I've forgotten what I was going to say. I'll edit this bit out. What did you say?
We're talking about, we all think we know about our businesses, but without asking the questions, we won't.
Yes. And so I think it's really important that one of the things that I see a lot of the businesses we work with, because we work with businesses of all levels, the kind of the small freelance up to the £300 million beast, if you like, and everything in between. And one of the biggest things that they fail at is tracking data and investing time to track data. Could be around the product, could be around the people, those things. So when you talk, it reminded me of that when you talked about people and what do people think of the business at all the levels. That to me is data, that's tracking. And we forget that because we're so busy, we're so focused on sales and marketing, but actually there's so many levels in business to track. So you must do a lot of that, helping people to take a look, a zoom out.
If you think of the business as a living organism, because it is, most businesses are made up of people, whether it's just one person or several thousand, it's made up of people. And the healthier the organism, the more successful it's going to be. If you think about a business as if it was an athlete, if you're training for the Olympics, you're going to make sure that everything you do is at top quality. You're going to nourish, you're going to nurture, you're going to exercise, you're going to do everything you can to win. And I can't see why a business should be any different. You can see in huge businesses where they promise all these various things like, fairness and governance and compliance. And so often you hear that those things were just tick boxes. And actually, at the center of the organization is probably quite unhealthy. And therefore, people are unhappy and they're not doing the best jobs. And they are maybe pretending that they're working when in fact they're just marking time to the end of the day, or not providing value for money as they should. Because it's a contract, isn't it? When we agree to work and get paid, we're going into a contract. So we should be doing the best we can. But equally, our employer or our client should be behaving in the best way too, in an ethical manner too. So
that old saying that you should train people so that they can leave and go on to better things, but you should treat people that they would never want to. That kind of culture.
So find balance. And it can be overlooked when you're really busy and you're just focused on revenue and profits. It can get lost.
So in terms of when businesses of all the levels or stages, I think it's relevant to all of them, they're looking at their sales and marketing side of things. What would you say are the top tips that you would give? And should they be spending a lot more time tracking? Should they be looking? Should they have a lot more focus on the numbers?
Yes, always, and getting the money in too. I think cash still king, isn't it? no matter where you are in life, cash is going to be king. But I
Yeah.
think I strongly believe we should enjoy our businesses. And if we're not happy in what we do, then that comes across in the way we behave with our clients, our suppliers, our teams. It comes across. So anything you can do to support a business owner so that they can relax and enjoy what they're doing and work on their business, I think is vital. And that's my perspective on what I do. I go in.
And also that comes with experience to develop that perspective. And that's the bit we're talking about that AI can't replace, as well as that experience that if they work with you, that you can give.
But AI is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly valuable as a resource that supports businesses, helps them to function more effectively and efficiently. I don't think one should see it as, oh, it's replacing people. Inevitably, jobs will go, but hopefully it will also enhance growth.
And new jobs will come.
Yes, also new businesses. Because the people that move on, an awful lot of people these days, there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there. And one of my early coached a PA in a law firm, but her boss said she wasn't happy and there was a lot of there was a lot of sickness and lateness and all the rest of it. And effectively, she wasn't happy. And she had this little sideline that she loved. And she lived quite a long way from the location of the business, quite a long train ride, a young child, all sorts of things that meant she would really be happy at home. And that was my advice, was to find another job. And I know when I mentioned it to my brother-in-law, who owns a business that I was consulting in, he said, "Oh my God, you told someone to leave." I said, "Yeah, they weren't happy. They weren't the best employee. That it was impacting other employees. Surely they should find a job that, if you do the sums."
I think sometimes what a lot of people lack in life is the goal and the vision and the kind of what's their why, that they're doing something, which then means that they have some meaning and some passion towards it and somewhere to go, because you can't get somewhere if you don't have a destination, is the other true fact. And then it's about managing your mindset. So from there, while you're doing it, you know where you want to go, you'll find that people tend to want to work a little bit harder. Because I get that hard work. I used to have a boss that said hard work trumps talent. I don't think so, because you could have all the talent in the world, but if you don't work,
Yes,
you got to apply it and you got to have the passion. So is it mindset? Is that a really important thing? Like the why, the vision, the goal, and the mindset?
I think so. And I think that applies whether you're working as a PA in a business, because the mindset there, if you're a good PA, is to really support your boss and ensure that their life is facilitated so they can then go on and grow the business. So you're in at every level, I think. Go back to thinking of the business as an organism, and every cell in the body is working effectively. And so your PA, whether you're the cleaner who's employed on contract, we need our cleaners to leave the offices looking brilliant if we have clients coming in. And also staff. We want to feel comfortable in the environment. We don't want to go into...
And it's the little things, isn't it, that make such a difference. And we're doing something at the moment around what we do. We don't really... It's not a product, it's just a thing, which is spirituality in business. And when I say that word spirituality, you probably turned half the audience off and they're hitting for the pause button and they're off. But I think that is mindset. I would call that a different word. And if I talk to a lot of spiritual gurus, they would tell me you're talking rubbish. That's not true. Spirituality is XYZ, and it's whatever it means to them. But I think for me, it means there's your mindset, there's what you think, there's your goals, your passions, your beliefs. There's trying to walk, talk, and act like the person that you want to become before you become it means that you almost attract it. Like having the destination. If you start to climb a mountain, you will finish if you just keep going. It's going to be painful. You're going to learn a lot along the way. You're probably going to have really bad blisters on your feet. And business is a bit like that. You have to keep going, but you have to have focus around your mindset. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't look after your health and you don't work hard and you work hard on all the wrong things, then you're going to go nowhere. So you need to have a really clear goal and a vision, a really clear focus. And I think the spirituality stuff that we talk about in our socials is more about how do you give yourself the best possible, your mental health, your physical health, your beliefs, your values, your why, and try and reach a goal and the vision. And I'd say aside from that, actually, there's another point that's probably relevant just to bring up, which is the noise element. Because I think there's a lot of noise in business anyway when you're, whatever level you're at, because you're always going to want to aspire for more and the vision is always more. And that can be quite stressful. And often there's no one to talk to around that. And so it can be really challenging that having lots of different things and being able to then still focus. And when you throw AI into that and you've got 50 different apps you need to learn, and it all, to me, that screams chaos and stress. So I remember once when I was 18, I went into the army, Sandi, and anyone who knows me, I don't really talk about this story, but they're going to know, hang on a minute, you were in the army? Oh my God. But yeah, I was in the army. And when we did our basic training, I never passed out. I got to the 12th week of basic training and then I had to exit. So when joining, I ticked the form for I'd never had bronchitis or asthma. And I just knew that they would put me through 6 months of tests. So I was a little bit naughty and I fibbed and I got found out in one of my medicals and they looked at my medical records and so they kicked me out and it was all very shameful. You can't rejoin for 4 or 5 years. And so I couldn't go into any of the forces. And that's what I'd been taught. Go into the forces, secure things. So I had to do something different and that was sales. That's how I got into sales in the first point of view. But I remember in that basic training, they took you down as a group of people and they took you into a bunker and they gassed you with CS gas in this bunker. And so the exercise was to teach people that they would make you say your name, your rank, the regiment that you were in, and you couldn't leave the bunker until you said it. So there were people being ill, there were people, and so the first person went up and couldn't say it, and it became this kind of, they took so long to get it out, and so then they were struggling, and eventually they let him go up. And so he's out on the grass outside and he's being really ill. The point of this story is by the time it came round and you'd seen everyone else ahead of you, there may have been a lot of chaos, but you were going to be focused and you got that out and you got it out quick because it had to come out. You had to achieve the goal, but you're going to do it in the quickest way possible because otherwise it gets really painful. So you had to focus and garner everything. And I think that lesson for me reminds me in a way a little bit of the business world when it all is a little bit noisy. Like you need to be able to focus and have crystal clear focus on the goal. And I think people struggle with that. They go off in all sorts of different directions. They don't have a why, they don't have a goal or a vision. Do you see a lot of that, or have you seen a lot of that in your...
No, I tend to work, I've been fortunate. Most of the people I've worked with have huge vision. And the reason I started working with entrepreneurs was because someone got in touch with me and said, oh, there's this commercial laundry in Wiltshire that needs your help. And I thought, don't know anything about commercial laundries and it's a mid-sized business. I don't know. Anyway, I drove down because I'd been referred to them and I met them. Most amazing man. And he built his business up from nothing and sold it once to an investment firm. And then during a financial downturn, things went wobbly and he bought it back. And he was building it up again with the view to exit. He had about 200 staff. He knew how to use every piece of machinery in the business. Their clientele were all in central London, in the city. It was the fine dining within corporate clients and big corporates in London. And their lorries were leaving Wiltshire at something like 4:35 in the morning to get into London. And he would do that. And he just knew every aspect of his business and he knew exactly where he wanted to take it. And he also knew that he didn't want me to help him to market it as a commercial laundry. He wanted me to market it as hospitality. That's quite a challenge. And his motto was, if it's not challenging, it's not worth doing. Anyone could do the easy. I thought that was really interesting and very focused. And I've found most of my clients have been really focused on where they want to go. Hardly any that have been focused. And so I've been able to just help them with that direction.
Yeah. Do you know, I think when you're saying that, if it's not challenging, he doesn't want to do it. I've seen a similar kind of thing phrased to me or recently, and it resonated with me that around the kind of the lower end of people that are starting to think of a business and or they're starting up or they're pivoting, which a lot of businesses are going to have to learn how to do much quicker now over the next coming years. And so they're talking, if they talk to people about what they're planning to do. And so if their family and their friends are like, oh, what a great idea, I really support you, then they probably shouldn't do it, is the argument. If their family and their friends are like, that sounds really complicated, I don't really get it, and no, I think you should stick with what, that's the kind of Steve Jobs area of, I had a vision. And there's probably, if it's difficult to do, it's probably going to be, goes one of two ways. Either you're going to spend a load of time and get absolutely nowhere, but typically something that's hard comes with a reward. If you just frame it differently and ask, how can I? Not, well, I can't do that.
Point. I think that's the point. What do your clients find most difficult? How can you help them?
Yeah.
I think that's really if you turn it around, that's really what he was saying. Yeah. What's the most difficult part of my sector? And can I respond to it? Can I resolve it? Because the reward is going to be greater.
And things look so much different when you frame it that way. How can I help whoever is going to buy from you, as opposed to how can I make money from whoever's going to buy from you? Yeah, you get a different result.
Yeah. I think always look for the problem. What's the problem? And I think if you can identify the problem and know that it's going to need a solution, and at the moment no one's providing that solution or not adequately providing that solution, then that's where your focus should be. If you think you can do it.
And I think I was just going to say to the audience that there's going to be a lot of people who are watching this are probably of the size of business who are going to need to look at all sorts of these different avenues, specifically like the leadership side of things. And I know that you and David have some work that you're doing there for firms in terms of how to train the new leaders. And there's this kind of gap between the rainmakers, the over 40s, and then the kind of the next talent, if you like. So yeah, just to say to the audience that I think that yourself and David do a really great job in that. But equally, I think we're going to move into a world where other things are going to become really important around the systems and processes and the structure and pillars of a business, that you two would be really great people to work with, because they'd have the AI, but bringing the person into that, I think is going to help a lot of people to scale and avoid, in my opinion, what is going to put some businesses out of business. A bit like the Netflix to the blockbusters to Netflix, the taxis to Ubers. I think there's a bit of that coming, that big businesses will become casualty for not understanding or moving quick enough. But the leadership thing, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of leadership.
What you were talking about earlier about spirituality, the generation, the entry-level generation, so people from the ages of 15 to 30, Gen Z, basically, what matters to them most is harmony, enjoying what you do, honesty, the ethics of the business. All of these things are very important to them, their work-life balance. And even though at some stage how much they earn is going to be critical, because they're obviously going to want homes and build families and all the other things one does in life, but to be able to engage with this particular generation, it's important to understand them and understand how they feel and what it is they're looking for. And I think that spirituality point that you made is key, because harmony comes from clarity and authenticity and feeling that what you do is of value and having that feedback from your managers to recognize your value and to say, yes, you've done a good job, and not just ignore you. We all want a pat on the back. And I think this is where leaders need to really stop and consider how they treat their teams. Because if you want to get the best out of people, and if you want to keep the best people, if you want to reduce churn, then you have to understand who you're working with. And
It affects so much, doesn't it? The culture, the systems, the process. Everything starts with what leaders you have in your business.
yeah, if you think about it, if you're treating your techies really badly, they can easily ruin your business.
It goes back to that, how do you make people feel? And that's true of customers as well as when you look inside. How do you make people feel? You'll often see the really fantastic businesses of the world. I'm not saying it's always true, because people need a pay packet. So you'll always find someone who just needs to do a job.
Yeah.
But if you want someone who's going to get in the trenches with you and help the business grow, then that leadership really does affect all sorts of different things throughout the business.
It goes back to training and keeping people. You can train them well and they'll move on and do a great job in another company. But if you want to keep talent, you really have to think about how you treat them. And I've just been doing I've done a few courses recently around imposter syndrome and about confidence and management. And it's interesting that the younger people who've been coming on these courses really value their time. They don't always want to network outside of business. They want to network within the business day. And that's going to be a challenge too, because if we're not in terms of sales and networking and marketing, you're still going to rely on your human resources and how you treat people and how you help them to develop and how you listen to what they say.
These people as well, Sandi, I mean, it brings me back into that AI side of things where I'm thinking, as you're saying this, that those young people are going to be more susceptible to doing things at scale and at speed with AI. So I can imagine there's a lot of kind of big businesses who are behind the wheel on how they can get their employees to do 10 times more. But it starts with that guy that you were talking about where he knows everything in the business. If you don't know it at the top and your leaders don't know it, then how are they going to get these people to do the 10 times more using AI and maximize and make them feel happy about it? There's a real opportunity there that I think a lot of these businesses, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they've all switched to it, but are going to have missed.
If you turn this round, you've also got a generation coming in who are used to social media and used to technology and not so used to talking to people face to face or on the phone. And that's also a challenge in business.
And that's one of the core kind of fundamental, that's one of the things that making them the new rainmakers, isn't it? I think
yes,
what you and David are doing.
Yeah. In fact, David and I are running a training course at the end of June at the IOD, all about, it's aimed at newly qualified lawyers and helping them to understand how to speak to the clients, how to use the phone, not to feel that they have to go in another room in order to use the phone because they feel uncomfortable and shy and uncertain. We're human beings, we should be able to speak to each other. And so if we can provide them with that confidence to know that it's actually not that difficult, learn how to take a deep breath and just form your thoughts so that you can talk to someone. They're fundamental skills.
As you're discussing that, it makes me think about, I talk about introducing business accelerators because I really think for someone to run a business now, and obviously because I've set up and run 5 businesses, like I'm not Steve Jobs here, but there's lots of things that I've been through and tried and failed and learned that from a business accelerator at its core as it is, systems, processes, people, culture, how you set it up, sales, marketing, I often forget all of the different avenues that you can add there. That is probably quite unique. The sales and marketing side, like we can add some huge value there in terms of the AI integration side and the being the head of the curve and the knowledge on that. So it's not, when you're thinking about I'm reevaluating our own business accelerators, they're actually going to be a lot more than that. for anyone, and probably not just the small businesses either because of that. But anyway, going back to, because I think that's really important, you're going to be working with big firms predominantly to help build these leadership teams and with their Gen Z, like law firms. And so who would it be if they're listening to this, or they switched on and they're finding our conversation really interesting, which is nice, thanks. But what can you help them with, or what sort of firms are you helping?
I work with companies that are turning over in the region of 500,000 upwards. And so it depends on the type of company. In terms of sectors, it's all sectors. So because I'm talking about how they approach the business and how to lead a business, and whether or not what they're focusing on at the moment is going to be the most profitable area of their business. There might be something else that's more profitable. But currently, what I'm doing with David Roylance, who is an actor and author,
I love David.
and has the most amazing voice. So David and I work together on issues like, at the moment, we're talking to law firms who've got newly qualified lawyers who need help with things like imposter syndrome, confidence, time management, all the usual, difficult conversations. So we run these half-day sessions at the Institute of Directors in Pall Mall. And it's just for 10. We don't want any more than 10 people because we want to give them, we're both world-class coaches, so we want to be sure that what the 10 people who come to these courses get is very intense training that's actually giving them exercises that they can work on and use and develop going forward on their own. Yeah, that's eminently affordable, according to one of my clients. So I'm very relieved to know that as well. It doesn't make me wonder if it's too cheap.
I'm going to put the link to both of your profiles
Thank you.
in here. And I've also had another conversation with the fabulous David, and I'll put both of your links, because we've referenced what you are doing, into the comments. You'll be able to go to Sandi's LinkedIn profile, get a bit more of a feel for her, and I'm sure there's on there you're going to find how you can sign up to one of the courses, work with Sandi.
Alternatively, of course, if they have leadership teams that need our help, and we go in-house then and work with the law firms with their leaders. And that's a totally different type of training. It's very much leadership.
I think it's going to be really important for people at all levels to have that. So yeah, that resource is there, and Sandi's fabulous. I can vouch for that to work with. We've done a bit of work together from first-hand experience. Yeah, go and check her out, and David also. So in terms of, let me ask you a couple of questions, I suppose, quick fire round. So what would you say are the biggest reasons that businesses fail? If you were to give the top 3 reasons that businesses fail, what would it be?
Oh, gosh.
I put you on the spot there.
You have. There are top 3. Probably the first one is probably overconfidence and lack of focus. So if someone starts a business, and I can think of several occasions where I've known people who've decided to start their own business, but they have no understanding of need. Is there a need for what you're doing?
They have an ego, but they don't necessarily
and if there's
understand.
Is it a saturated market? There are loads of reasons. Or maybe you've been underpricing yourself for years, you're not making a profit. So businesses can fail for all sorts of reasons.
I watched a podcast recently, which was one of Alex Hormozi's, and as I watch a lot on YouTube, I consume a lot of content, and he was talking about how the first 3 or 4 businesses he started and then sold for 65 million or whatever, he always gave away to 10 to 20 people first for free the service, so that he could get some feedback, could iterate quicker, could, as he called it, flush the system out first. And then he would change all those things, and then he would have all of the reviews. He would have built all the landing pages. He plugs the product in, and then he knows that he can charge a lot of money because all of those things are in place. And then he was saying, and then what I do is I just up the price. Okay, people are still buying. I up the price, and I up the price until it drops halfway, maybe, but I'm still getting less customers, more money. And then I need to look at what do I need to change to go to the next level. What's your thoughts on that? Because I found that fascinating. He gives it away for free.
I think it's a brilliant way of finding out whether there's a need for your product or service. I think that's excellent. You have to be brave because most people, you think about someone who's jumped off the corporate ladder, they've decided they've got a job, they've got a business, they've got an idea, and they're completely behind it, and they've no longer got an income. They're going to be scared to give away anything free. It is
Yeah.
a very brave thing to do. And I think also we all want to be earning. So the these days you tend to find people with a sideline, a 5 to 9, as well as a 9 to 5. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, quite a healthy way of growing your business and ensuring it's
Yeah.
a success. And in fact, that PA I was talking about, that's what she was doing. And it gave her the confidence and the security to, she had an income from her day job, but she was also growing her business until she got to the point where she knew she could focus simply on the business. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. It's always going to be a risk. I don't believe there's any surefire, very few surefire business ideas out there. Maybe the safety pin,
Okay.
hair clip, and the rat trap. I don't, mouse trap, sorry. My husband keeps telling me, calling it a rat trap. But I don't know. I think most businesses, you've got to constantly look at iterations and evolve and develop.
And I think people will have to do that more quickly, like where you might have had to do that every couple of years. I think we're going to move into a world that people are just going to have to move faster, and it might be for a period of time, every 3 months, every 6 months, or they'll be maybe falling to the foul side of the guillotine, if you like. So if you think on the other end, then let me ask you, so
Can I just add one more? Because we
yeah,
were talking about why businesses fail. And I think sometimes the unexpected, like COVID, an economic downturn of global
yeah,
proportion, or a pandemic or a war, there are instances like that, of course. But then for the most cases, I think we all can see the writing on the wall when things are changing, and we don't always respond properly.
mm.
And that's another reason why businesses.
And location recently, I know we both follow certain people that I could name quite a few of them, but one of them, Daniel Priestley. And I saw a post that he did this morning, and I stopped and I looked at it and I thought, no, I'm too busy to do anything about that. But it was interesting that he was saying there are a lot of businesses that are tied to a location. And if you're tied to a location, you're a location-based business in 2025, that could be the next biggest reason that people fail when we live in a world where you can live anywhere, work anywhere, employ anywhere since the pandemic. Like, you're missing out on global income by limiting yourself to a location. And I found that really interesting because the kind of SEO rule of thumb is going on the local based services. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a big issue that people are going to have to change?
I think that younger generations, people probably under 30, are much more able to relocate or become, what's it called?
Digital nomads?
Thank you. That's what I was trying to think about. Much more easy for them to be digital nomads because they don't necessarily have young children and have to think about schooling and things like that. Obviously, that can change as well, more and more.
That brings in the kind of the movement side of things. But thinking even about our business, we made a shift from a UK business
Oh, yes.
to
Mine's
not putting the limits, and then we have
global.
clients all over. Yeah.
During COVID, particularly, I was working with clients around the globe.
Yeah.
So, yes, and with colleagues around the globe. And I have done in the past anyway, because my corporate clients were international. So even though I was based in London, I was working with clients around the globe. So that, because of the type of work I was doing, working with clients in finance and travel and hospitality and tourism. So that was part of our work ethos anyway. But
I think so. For those businesses who may be starting and scaling, maybe some of these big businesses are tied to a location, can actually uplift in terms of their revenue. Still, you never know. But if you are a new business or you're scaling up, then consider that the location shift. And I think, so for those businesses who maybe starting and scaling, maybe some of these big businesses are tied to a location, can actually uplift in terms of their revenue. Still, you never know. But if you are a new business or you're scaling up, then consider that the location shift You can't do that if you're a restaurant, but you could question if you're an accountant, do you need to focus on a town these days? Could you release the inhibitions?
I don't know. I think possibly it depends on how big you want to grow. If you are a local accountant who
I
wants to
mean,
concentrate on local clients, then it
comes
depends on
back to your
your,
why and your vision, doesn't it?
yeah, it
But,
does.
for
Ambition.
sales marketing, that made so much sense to me. Why limit yourself? And so we did this not promote to everybody, because I think then you promote to nobody. And I do believe in that. But in terms of location, it was promote to anybody. And it's quite interesting then where we see that our followers are. When we look at our SEO efforts, when we look at our Google Search Console, and then when we look at the clients that we get and where they come from. And that has given us a lot more reach in different countries.
I think it depends on your ambition, doesn't it? And the niche
Mm,
you want to build. If you want to be, let me think, if you want to be someone who helps, you can live in this country and be a fluent French speaker or a French national who is helping expat Brits with their properties in France. And you don't
yeah,
have to live in France to do that. You do have to understand, obviously, the French legal system, and you have to
yeah.
ideally be absolutely fluent in the language and the culture so you can deal with those quirks. But it really depends on the niche, the type of person you are, your ambition.
Yeah,
I would
comes
say
back to that,
I wouldn't
the
want
pain that you solve.
people, they have to be global if they don't want to be. I mean, it's really depends on each. I can see where Daniel Priestley's coming from, obviously, but it takes all sorts to build this world, doesn't it?
Isn't that the thing, though, isn't it? Because that's the noise element, isn't it? And everybody's got an opinion, and now you've got ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and 60 million different others have got an opinion. And so I think those who are going to be in the winner in business, they share that same thing. They have the goal, they have the vision, they have crystal clear focus, and then they're able to make a decision for good or for bad, and to learn as they go along and pivot quickly. I think those are going to be the makeups of businesses in the future. But I would say for our viewers as well, it's not there currently, but we're working on taking Sandi's brain and what Sandi knows and putting that into an AI app on our Tenacious AI apps, which I think you're on board with, Sandi.
I am on board with it, fascinated by it. Took me a long time to realize that I had to actually think about what I do in terms of not just what I do, but in terms of the outcome in order for it to become an app. It's
Yeah.
just all the think of it as a system and processes.
And of course, they'll be able to, it'll work like you ask it questions. So it'd be very much similar to ChatGPT. And I hear people screaming, why don't I just go and use ChatGPT then? But we talked about people and having those little sprinkles and golden nuggets and the experience and the pain that you've been through and the things that you know, and applying the personal element to that actually it makes a big difference. It's not just flat. It's if someone wanted to get inside your mind and ask you questions, they're only as good as the questions that they would ask.
Yes.
But yeah, that's going to be a unique feature of the Tenacious platform, is that we will get different experts for one area. So one for IT, one for marketing, one for whatever it might be, and then put their minds in there so that as businesses use us, whether they're startups, scale ups, much bigger than that, they can get that expertise, but actually at not much cost compared to normal.
So the complicated aspect of that is understanding what questions to ask.
But you're only ever as good as the prompt. You're only ever as good as the question. Everything in life is the idea and the question.
Absolutely. It's like FAQs, we were talking about them much earlier. The FAQs have got to be relevant, and if they're not going to work, because I think you said AI could just take away all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, I suppose, one flavor of that. But one of the things we didn't discuss, which I think is probably the biggest headline topic that is facing a lot of businesses in struggle right now, is what happened at the Google I/O 2025, where they introduced their AI mode as a search platform, which is currently being trialed in the US. And so there's probably going to be a whole lot of businesses now. If you imagine Where before search was built around you search and then you click, and then so it's clicks and impressions. And but if Google now also is going to be like ChatGPT and it's just going to give you the answer, it's now an answer engine, not a search engine. If you have the answer, why do you click? So now it's going to become a whole different set of skills in their SEO. That how do they write content to show up in an AI world? I suppose it comes back to that AI readiness. There's going to be a load of businesses that aren't AI ready. Probably 95% of businesses in the world are not AI ready, and they need to get there really quickly.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people have probably been using Google in that way for a number of years now, asking questions. So they're moving towards it rather late in a way. It's interesting because
Yeah, because it's not just search terms and keywords, it is questions that we ask. Yeah.
I've been doing it for years, asking Google questions rather than not just saying where is the nearest Italian
Have
restaurant.
you done that yet in ChatGPT or Perplexity?
I've used ChatGPT to find out where various businesses are that I've been interested in because of another business concept that I'm working on. And it's been quite limiting, I've found.
Mm.
See, what it's doing is scraping and coming back with options.
I find it really interesting because we've been helping people to rank in ChatGPT for months. And so that's the thing, is you just structure things slightly differently from the business profiles you have to the content and the structured data behind your website and all these kind of things that mean it's easier for an ask engine to mention your business. But if you imagine now, in order to get shown, to even be visible, that most businesses, 89 million businesses globally, they're not even going to be visible in Google in the US right now, unless they structure everything differently. So you still want to be shown, even if you're not going to get the clicks, you still want to be shown as an answer. So I think you're right. Is search within these AI engines perfect right now? And does it show your business in the same way that Google would? No, but getting mentioned is going to be incredibly important, especially when AI mode comes all over the world.
I think also we have to learn to ask the right questions. It goes back to those questions, doesn't it? It's rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. You're going to get a less than perfect answer. So you have to think about how to structure the questions in order to
And you know how before businesses they'd still have to find the keywords. It's re-engineering or reverse engineering what you've just said. So in order to get the right answer that you want from ChatGPT, you're only as good as the questions, and the questions are the engine room, which I think is the same in sales. In order to get what you want, you're only as good as the questions that you ask. So for business owners now,
yeah, absolutely. You have to know what questions are going to be asked.
Yeah, you don't get anything. And also, you have to make people feel emotions. People buy because of emotions, and then they back it up with logic later. It's nothing to do with your products and fact, feature, benefit. As like when I started out in sales 25 years ago, it was fact, feature, benefit. Now it's no, find a pain and then just offer a solution to the pain. And you only find the pain if you ask the right questions. So it's like a game. But I think when people are looking at their SEO now and they want to rank in Google AI mode, if you're in the US, or in ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and all these other models, they need to reverse engineer that phrase and think of the questions, the right questions that their buyers would be asking and that their clients would be asking. And the content then needs to answer those questions. And I don't think most businesses know what the questions are yet, let alone. So they've got to flip keywords and search terms they need to know exactly what the people need first. And then they write the content.
So it's a bit of KYC, know your client. So you have to really know your client. And
I wonder how many people are AI ready in that respect right now.
Going to be an interesting few years. I was just before we started to talk, I watched a little bit of TV, and Sir Chris Hoy was on there, and he was saying we never know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
So just concentrate on now. And I think that with an eye on the future in terms of AI, we have to concentrate on now. What's happening now, and how can we ensure our businesses are successful now?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think that's great. You're right. I'll put that as the final words.
and then I shall say thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. So it's been quite broad, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always enjoy our conversations, and I feel like I always take something. So I hope I give something in some way back, but I always take something from it, find it really valuable.
I've made notes. Yes, I always make notes. Oh, I look that up. I better look that up. I'll find out a bit more about that. Yes.